I'm Beth Billings with Around the Table Yarns, and tonight we are doing the NAiMA sweater by Ankestrich. We are working our way through this sweater, so this is the fifth time that we've met, and we had people who had a lot of questions about the moving the markers, and so we worked on moving the markers last time. This time we have progressed from moving the markers, this is at the bottom of the yoke, to where we are dividing for our sleeves. And so I'm going to demonstrate dividing for the sleeves and get us started on the body. And then we have, this is May, we have one more meeting. So finishing the body is going to be on you. So that's going to be your assignment. So we're going to get started on the body today if you haven't already. And finishing that is your assignment for May. We will start and pick up and get going with the sleeves for our last class. And then I will also, during the last class, do some demonstrations of finishing. So if I forget to do that, remind me. But we're going to work on weaving in ends, especially working in the round from the top down. Sometimes the ends turn up in strange places. We can try and avoid that by starting and finishing balls of yarn under the, I usually try and do it in the line of the underarm as we're going down, because that's hidden by your arms as you stand normally. I try not to do any changing of yarns in this general area. So the back or the underarms are the best places to change your skeins, even if it means wasting some yarn, because you will never be happy with a color change or a skein change that happens on your nipple, ever. Just saying. So this morning we did a demonstration because there's quite a bit that's going on in the pattern here, and so I'm going to work through the setup row of the separating the sleeves from start to finish on my sweater. And so I might pause it a little bit while I'm doing the boring knitting, but we're going to do each part of the doing the setup round for separating the sleeves. So this is page 6 of your pattern. Again, this is a copyrighted pattern that is a paid pattern, so I'm not going to show the pattern on the video, but I am going to work through the directions and demonstrate what the pattern is telling us. So I'm not going to talk about the total number of stitches because I don't want to reveal copyrighted material. And let's get started. Pause for a sec. All right, so where the pattern begins for the setup round of separating the sleeves is right in the middle of the underarm, right at the underarm. This is my beginning of round marker. And so I have worked the correct number of stitches. And then it tells me to put the next number of stitches onto waste yarn. And you'll see.
I have a question, Beth. Is my beginning of round is in the middle of my underarm as we were adding? Did you just move yours over? Because yours is by the eyelet.
Yours should be there. Have you already separated for your sleeves?
No, I've just been adding because sometimes I added before the beginning of round and sometimes so maybe that's my error. So I have 4 or 5 stitches before the beginning of round after the eyelet before the beginning of round.
So your beginning of round should be at the eyelet. So if I review what I have right here, my beginning of round marker is 1 stitch over from the eyelet.
Because sometimes you increased right after the eyelet, but you just moved your beginning of round over.
Yes, so we were moving our markers previously.
Yeah.
And now we should have So here's what it looks like when you're done with this. It's like a gusset, essentially.
Yeah, I got that look, just.
Okay,
mark
so
across.
the marker should be here,
Yeah,
one stitch over from your eyelet. So the eyelet was a knit two together here,
yeah,
and then a yarn over,
yeah,
and then the marker. So
yeah,
slide a marker in there,
yeah,
and then the other marker should be inside of the last increase that happened on the sleeve.
right,
And that should give you the correct number. And that's where the markers should be also on the other side. After the eyelet, because it's coming around the other way,
yeah,
and before the last increase on the armhole side, on the sleeve side.
right,
Okay, so those are where your markers should be. I'm doing, you know, on my size, this is the correct number of stitches between the markers. So
got it.
what's been happening with this is that once we started moving our markers with this pattern, and I put this on shorter needles to make it easier to do what I was going to do next, so I can't really stretch it out, but I will in a second. What you'll notice is the stitches between the markers have stayed the same throughout now. So
Right,
as we've been doing this, the stitches between the markers have stayed the same, and the number of stitches increasing has been happening between the underarm sections. Is that right? The side sections where these little gussets have been happening. And the reason for all of this is that the sleeve was continuing to increase along this line. This gusset is really just the side of the front or back with the line of eyelets going straight down instead of at an angle. So going back to the beginning of the round, and again, there are 4 sections like that, not 2, but 4 sections where there are eyelets and gussets because they're on either side of each sleeve. So there's one on every, at the beginning and the end of each sleeve. So this is the beginning of my first sleeve. Again, the beginning of round should be next to your eyelet. It tells you to work over, the pattern tells you to work over so many stitches and that you have so many stitches before the first marker. Okay, now if I were doing this on a regular, I don't have a scissor, a regular needle, tapestry needle, and a piece of waste yarn. Just going to show what that looks like so that everybody can do that. If they don't have rubber cord, a tapestry needle and waste yarn works just fine. So if you were going to transfer it, you would take a tapestry needle and you would go purlwise into each stitch, slip it onto the tapestry needle, up to the marker. It says remove the marker and put the next blank number of stitches, and that's all the stitches between that marker and this marker. So you would continue with the stitches onto the tapestry needle, and what I do is I just fill it up and then pull it through some. So I get all of the stitches onto the needle. It's just easier to control things on the needle if it's right at the tip of your knitting needle. And then as you go, you would allow the stitches to travel over onto the waste yarn. And you would want to cut a piece that is plenty long. So for the sleeve around, you want a piece that's at least 3 feet long so that you have plenty and you can tie a bow and you won't have to worry about it pulling out. So that's the tapestry needle for holding your waist or holding your sleeve stitches.
And you said that you were using cotton, is like
I
you're
use
suggesting
cotton.
cotton?
I am suggesting cotton. I suggest
Because,
mercerized cotton is a little less sticky and it's a little easier to slide on and off of
okay, thank you.
than a wool. Wool is a little fuzzy. So another method that we use a lot more often now is this. This is a Barber cord. They come in a little tin that says the Knitting Barber. They cost $17.50. This is the original one. Mine is pink. It comes in all of these different colors. I know toys can sometimes seem like an expensive, not very important thing, but this particular one is a very helpful time saver, and I'll show you why. The Barber cord is a silicone tube, and it attaches without impermanently. It attaches temporarily by just shoving it on to the end of your knitting needle, and it will work up to quite a large size knitting needle. And then when it's on like that, you can just gently, and I do mean gently, because if you pull too hard, it can pop off. And that means fixing things. So I've got my other needle pulled out pretty far, and I'm just gently moving all of the sleeve stitches, to this marker. All of them are going over. So here's my Barber cord there still, and I'm just gently kind of pushing them along the needle, keeping that attached until I get to this marker. And it tells me I'm putting the next number of stitches on there, and then the next after the marker are also going on. So for me, that's that many. So I just want to push it over a little bit further until I have all of those stitches on my Barber cord. So this is where the tapestry needle would come out. So here's my last marker. I'm just going to leave it there. I don't need to fuss with it. It can come out later when I'm picking up and doing around the sleeves. There's
So
no,
you divide up the raglan. It's not marker to marker. It's so many stitches after the marker.
it's so many stitches before and after the raglan marker, not the eyelet marker.
Got it.
And the eyelet markers are still going to move in this round, because I figured that out at the end of class today. So we had to redo some of it. So you're going to go, for me, it's this many stitches before my marker was here. Sorry, my marker was here. And now I'm going to go this many stitches after the marker. That's where I'm going to pop my, oh, I put it on there real good. So just to make it a little more secure, I'm going to pull it out a little bit so I can pop that off. Now I can move them all along the length, the short lengths. The Barber cord comes with 3 total, 2 30-inch. And so I can just tie the ends of that together here, and nobody's getting those off of there. Okay, now my sleeve is completely saved, and I can just reattach by undoing this knot when I'm ready to do my sleeve. And you know how hard it can be to pick up off of waste yarn? You just reposition the Barber cord to the end and you scoot the stitches back on. And then you're done. You're not done. We're never done. But that's the thing that makes the Barber cord a really nice tool, because it makes moving stitches for many projects, not every single one, but for many projects, it makes moving stitches really easy. And they're generously sized so that you can try things on. At this point, the pattern says so I've got these stitches are now being held out of the way. And this is the end of my one side of my sweater, right? This is the beginning of the underarm right here. And I'm going to add some stitches here. So the stitches I'm going to add are determined by my size. And I'm going to show you good, I have a marker right here. So I'm going to show you my preferred method for adding stitches. You can do it any way you like. I find this one a little bit firmer. I turn so my working yarn is attached to the left needle. So I've just turned my work. There's the marker we just passed. And here's the beginning of my Barber cord. I'm going to do a cabled cast on for the number of stitches that I want. A cabled cast on is like a knitted cast on. A knitted cast on, you just go into the stitch normally as if to knit. A cabled cast on, you go between the first and the second stitch on your left needle. Now, sometimes it is hard to tell which is your first stitch once you get going. So I recommend counting out loud or placing a marker before you start adding stitches so that you can clearly see what you're adding. So we could do that just because I just think we should keep track of things. So I'm just going to put a marker in front of my stitches. This is not one that's going to stay there. It's just one to help me keep track of my count. So that's the edge of my known stitches. And this can be a little in the way, but you just pull the yarn around, bring a stitch through. Waiting for that to come into focus. Hello. There we go. So I went between the two stitches, wrapped my yarn around it as though I were knitting a stitch, and then I bring a stitch through. That's between the stitches next to it. Pull that out and put it back onto the left needle. I leave it loose until I put my needle back between those two stitches, ready to cast on my next one, and then I pull it tighter. Wrap around. Pull it out nice and loose and put it back onto the left needle. Again, I leave it loose. Every time I showed somebody they pulled it tight, and then they're like, okay, I can't get it in. Like, yeah, don't pull it tight. So leave it loose, put your needle in, and then draw up the working yarn around both needles, and you'll have a nice, even and not too tight place for your stitch. So far I've done 2. I'm going to make 2 more. And that's the middle for me. So you cast on a set number of stitches, and then you're going to replace a new beginning of round marker. So mine was green. So I'm going to actually use another one that's sort of greenish. That's my new beginning of round marker. I'm not going to lose that one. And then you continue and cast on the other side of that marker. So again, I'm still using the cable cast on. So now you'll have another number of stitches after the marker. Okay, the reason it's called the cabled cast on is the appearance of the stitch looks a little bit like a cabled rope. You see that? So when you go between the 2 stitches instead of only into one, you double the thickness of the edge, and it's a little bit firmer and a little bit more long lasting. If you don't want it to be so firm, you can just knit into each stitch and pull out a new stitch. That would look like this. Knitting into that stitch. This is a knit cast on and pulling out one and putting it there. I'll do it again just so you can see the difference in the edge. 2, 3. So you can see that this edge is a little bit more sturdy looking. And this edge is only single strand down the last 4, whereas this is double stranded. So it's a matter of preference. I prefer a little bit firmer at a place where there's more stress on the fabric. So I feel like the underarm is a place where there's more stress on the fabric, and I'd like a little bit firmer cast on edge to the beginning of my underarm stitches. Okay, let's take those 4 off. Okay, so I don't need this anymore. I can take it off. I did not remove this beginning of round marker. It's still sitting there, but I've placed a new one, and my new one is now in the middle of my cast on underarm stitches. I'm going to turn back to the right side of the fabric because we're still working in the round. And these are now the beginning of my underarm. And I'm going to take my working yarn and my needle from the other side and scoot those stitches up. It looks like I've lost a marker on this side. I have. I wonder what happened. I demonstrated with this earlier, and so let me make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, so now I'm going to knit my number of stitches and remove my marker, but my marker's already removed. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is where my marker was. So after the beginning of round, you work across to where your other marker was. I don't know how that fell off. And you're going to remove this marker because we're going to move it over one, knit one, and replace the marker. And then you continue and you knit to 1 stitch before the other marker. So I have the front stitches to do. I'll come back when I get to the other end, please. So I'm working over to the other side, and I just want to say that this round is the round where I would try the sweater on, and where we did try the sweater on in our in-person class this morning. 4 of our participants tried their sweaters on, and they fit. And it was a really great feeling. But the dividing for the sleeves is the point where if you need to go a little further or you need to pull back a little bit, now is a good time to do it, because once you've divided for your sleeves, it feels very challenging to rip back and redo it. So I do recommend before you go on that you put everything onto waste yarn, or if you have Barber cords, you put everything onto the Barber cords and try it on, because if it's not fitting, you want to know now, not later. And if it is fitting, you want to know that now and not later. We had somebody who was like, no, if it doesn't fit, I'll give it to somebody who it fits. And I was like, wouldn't you like to know that it does fit though before you do all the rest of this work? And so we tried it on, and she was like, it does fit. It does. We were so delighted. And we had another person in the class this morning who's never knitted a sweater before ever. and she put it on and she was just amazed that she had made something that fitted her. So I can't stress enough how trying on helps. Okay. That was a little big aside. Now I'm coming to the other side of my, I think this is the front of my sweater. Coming to the other end of the front of my stitches, front stitches of my sweater. It feels like I'm almost there, but I have like 10 more. Because there's the eyelets coming up under my thumb. And it tells you to, so I've placed a marker on the other side, and then all the pattern says, and this is sort of in the center of the paragraph, knit to 1 stitch before marker. That's all of this knitting is knit to 1 stitch before marker. So there I am, 1 stitch before marker, and I'm going to place a new marker there. Let's see. And this is the same thing that we ran into with our the bag with my marker and it moved. This is the same thing we came into earlier when I said have an extra marker on hand. So have an extra marker on hand because you're going to knit to 1 stitch before the marker. You're going to place your new marker, knit the 1 stitch, and remove the old marker. Okay. And then it says knit a certain number, again, the same number that we did after the beginning of round marker, and put the next, for me, 4 onto waste yarn again. So I'm going to knit to the same place before the beginning of my sleeve. So we're repeating what we just did. And this is important. Sorry, I'm tangled. This is important because you want to make sure this particular start, you want to make sure that you're not starting this many stitches after this marker. You want to go to this many stitches before the further marker. Because otherwise, some of your sleeve stitches will be, sorry, some of your body stitches will be on the sleeve. So you want to make sure you get all the way to the right place. And this looks like what we did here. So you knit this many, and then there were.
So what this does is leave the eyelet so that the eyelet becomes part of the body.
Exactly. And there's no more increasing along the raglan for the sleeves after this because you're done with the sleeve, or you're done with the shaping for the sleeve, the preparation for the sleeve. My yarn is coming out of somewhere, I don't know where. Okay, there. Okay, so I'm still reading along with the pattern exactly. So this is, again, knit to 1 stitch before the marker, place a marker, knit 1, and remove the marker. So I've done that. And now I'm knitting from where this marker was the same number of stitches over, leaving the exact same number that it will be the beginning of my sleeve stitches. So now I'm going to do the same thing again with my Barber cord. I'm using the shorter Barber cord length for the sleeves, so the 30-inch length. And I'm going to slide these stitches. I'm not even going to take off that marker. I'm just going to put all of those stitches up to that marker, past that marker, And I'm doing it as gently as I can. I have had this pop off, and you just have to not panic. If the barber cord pops off, you have to sit still and just push the needle back to where the barber cord is sitting and reattach them. Don't try to push the barber cord to the needle. The needle moves much better than the barber cord does. So I get to my other marker, and the pattern says go so many stitches past the marker. So I'm going to go so many stitches past the marker, pull your waste yarn or your barber cord out on that side. Make sure your ends are nice and secure. And then tie a little loose knot. It doesn't have to be tight. It's not going anywhere. It's a little, the barber cords are a little bit sticky. If you're using cotton yarn, I recommend a bow. Just tie a bow on them. And don't tie them real tight, because you want to be able to try this on. So you don't want this to be like a constricted circle that you can't get your arm through. All right, so now we're back to making stitches. I turn my work to the wrong side so that my working yarn is attached to the needle in my left hand. I find the other half of it. Where did it go? Here it is. And I'm going to, again, use my removable stitch marker to just give me a good visual of where I'm starting this little process. You want your yarn, if you're doing this cable cast on knitwise, you could do it purlwise. There's no rule that says you can't. I'm going to do it knitwise because it's just as easy and it doesn't make any difference. So I'm going to cast on the cable cast on again. Half of the stitches until the middle of this underarm. And they, hold on, I'm reading. So they have you cast on all the stitches and there's no marker in between. Okay, so that's my total. I turn back because I do my cast on from the wrong side. I'm going to just tuck this out of our way. And now it says knit. Essentially, it tells you to knit the number of stitches to the next marker. So it says knit blank stitches, and that will take you to the other side of the sleeve stitches, or the other eyelet marker. So we're going to knit those stitches, and this is another move the marker game. So I'm going to remove this marker, knit one, and replace this marker. And now I'm going to knit over to the beginning of, to one stitch before the old beginning of round marker. So that's back where we started this process. So I'll just pause the video for a second so you don't have to watch me knit in slow motion for everybody. So when you get to the end of this round, you're going to be ready to start the body. And so that's going to be pretty much on your own. Get to the end of the body and then free up your needles for doing the sleeves for the last class. And we'll do one sleeve for the last class. All right, let me just pause and talking about that. I am now one stitch before my original beginning of round marker. So again, this is a place where if you need to place a marker, you should have it extra. So you don't have to fuddle and futz. And then it says knit one, place the marker, knit one, remove the old beginning of round marker, knit to the new beginning of round marker. And my new beginning of round marker is this turquoise one in the middle. And that's the end of our setup row. So now I'm knitting on, so you will be knitting partway further than you have been before for the beginning, the new beginning of round. I'm just going to go one past that so that it doesn't fall off while I talk about stuff. Okay. To pass my yarn is all twisted around. If your yarn is twisted around, I've found that it just makes more sense to untwist it and make it be free. So there's my yarn free and happy. It's really hard to see what's going on here. So I'm going to take a moment and put it onto the Barber cord so that you can see what it's supposed to look like. So I have the largest Barber cord. And now I'm going to run all of the stitches onto the Barber cord. This is also a good place to stop. At the end of separating sleeves setup round, it tells you how many stitches you should have on each section. So please check for your size and count your stitches. That was my partner. Don't call me in the middle of Zoom, partner. So I'm moving all of my stitches onto the longest Barber cord now. And the reason is so we can see what it's supposed to look like and not have it be all crowded. And the place where that's going to be trickiest is where we've cast on stitches. So again, you want to do this as gently as possible. You don't want to yank on these because that could pull the Barber cord off. So what I find it's easier if you just move stitches up to that and then gently, and I pinch here and pull them along so that there's a place to go. So move your stitches up onto the Barber cord and then down along the Barber cord. Turn as you go. And don't panic if the Barber cord comes out. Like I said before, if the Barber cord comes out, you're going to move the needle back towards the Barber cord in the stitches. And if you don't run around, they won't get lost. And by run around, I mean, don't run screaming through the house going, I've dropped a stitch. That's Tebow. He doesn't want you to run around the house saying you've dropped a stitch either. Teebs, what's going on? It's my dog making a lot of noise. Sometimes it's helpful to pull the needle out on the other side to gather these stitches up. And then continue pulling them along on the barber cord. The same goes for doing it with a tapestry needle, except you'd be doing this stitch by stitch. And again, you want to transfer the stitches purlwise onto whatever waste yarn you're using or whatever holder you're using. And just make sure that it's big enough to hold all of your stitches. Coming to the end. You have to keep stretching it along because the barber cord's a little sticky. It's a silicone product. I have lots left. I'm just moving things along. All right, let's finish getting these on. So when I have to pull it, so this is where they're attached. I pinch it here past where it's attached to move stitches along. So I'm not creating undue stress on the join of the cord and the needle. And there it is. There's my end. Pops out, grab a hold of it, and give a little tug. Do, do, do. Do. Up. So I'm going to tie my ends together so I know it won't pop off any of the stitches, and hold up my sweater and move the stitches around more evenly onto the cord. Shenanigans are going on behind me with the puppy and the kitty. Shenanigans, I tell you. Okay. So that is the front of my sweater. You can see those radial increases that were happening. There are my arms. I'm gonna back up a little. There are my arms attached. And the back of the sweater is longer because of the short rows that we did. So I'm going to take off my glasses. I'm going to try it on. Hello. So it's helpful if you have another person with you. And it looks like mine is bunching. I can't pull down the back, but we did try this on this morning and there's plenty of room. It comes down in the right places. There's plenty of room on my sleeves and it's fitting and it's looking good. It's caught up on me and I can't reach. So it's helpful if you have a helper when you try it on. So from this point onward, the body is just in the round. And if you are doing the A-line shape, your increases will happen In these underarm spots where the beginning of round marker is. I'm gonna get rid of my dog. Hold, please. He can really talk. Okay. So the next thing to decide, if you haven't already, is what shape of body you're gonna do. If you're doing the straight body, there's no more shaping, there's no more increasing. If you're doing the A-line shape, there will be increases that happen every it says you will replace round one with the following increase round every fourth repeat 3 times. So every 16 rows. So periodically increasing in between the underarms. And if you're doing the balloon shape, call me. Seriously, if you're doing the balloon shape, you work the same repeats as the straight body for 9.5 inches, and then you'll replace the round 2 with a different decrease round. And then you'll continue with the ribbing. So it's all a variation of the straight body. So everything is a variation of just working straight down. And I would chart out for myself where I do my increases. So I would write out the rounds that you're going to do. So we've been working with the rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, where round 1 is where we do the eyelet, and 2, 3, 4 have been plain knitting. So the same thing is going to happen with either the A-line or the balloon shaping, where round 1 is the eyelet, round 2, 3, 4 are just plain knitting, but in the balloon shape and the A-line shape, they have increases or decreases happening in those sections. So I would write out round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I would circle the rounds where the increases or decreases are supposed to happen and write out that list of rows, rounds. Does that make sense? I see nodding. Okay. And then the ribbing, you go back to a smaller needle size, and it is a twisted rib again. There's a little smidge of decreasing, probably just to straighten up the number of stitches. So I see a purl 2 together at the beginning of it. And you do that at the beginning of each half. I am surprised there's not, so I did not think that there was a place marker in the middle of the half, but I feel like there should be. I would go ahead and put a marker underneath the armpit on the other side. I'm reading it and it says knit to 1 stitch, cast on the full number of stitches. It doesn't say to place a marker in between them, but I'd want to know that I was at the halfway point, especially if I was doing any shaping on the other side. So I don't know why it doesn't say to put a marker there, but maybe if you're doing the A-line shape, she tells you to place a marker, or the balloon shape, she tells you to place a marker. Me personally, I like markers all kinds of places. Okay. That's the setup round for your body, for your, for the body. And that's separating the sleeves. Your sleeves should be nice and contained and off to the side while you work on your body. If you wanted to, you could do the sleeves next. But generally speaking, it's a matter of of personal opinion and taste, whether you want to do your sleeves next or your body next. But we're going to work on the body for the class, and then we're going to come back and do the sleeves on June. Looks like the 19th. So in a month. I hope you're all enjoying it. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the shop. info@aroundthetableyarns.com or 216-230-9224. You can leave a message. We get those as emails, and we try and get back to you as quickly as possible. And I'm going to end the recording.